Good morning. Today we're going to be talking about lies. Lies by oh, lies. Lies by conflation. the it's a popular technique that we hear a lot today, and especially when it comes to vaccines. Not just vaccines in general, but specific vaccines that haven't been tested for a certain period of time. We hear people say the logic is vaccines are safe. Therefore, anything we label as a vaccine is safe. Now, if you just let it wash over you, oh yeah, that's sound logic. If vaccines are safe, therefore, anything called a vaccine is safe. But that is a false logic. And if you think about it for a second, you're like, oh, yeah, that's total bullshit, right? Because things aren't safe because of vaccines. A vaccine is not safe because it is labeled a vaccine. A vaccine may be safe because it has undergone a decade or more of trials, tests, and watching patiently to see what long-term adverse effects there are. Also, we should be watching what the short-term acute injuries are from the vaccine. Now, people may try to disregard, well, there's benefit. Who cares if there's benefit if it kills people? If it saves one person and kills two, or if it kills one and saves one, it's sideways. Like, what is the point? There is no point. So, the labeling of something as a vaccine doesn't make it safe. You know, just the labeling of it is not what makes a vaccine safe. Not to say that there aren't safe vaccines. I don't know. Presumably, vaccines are safe. I have been injected with, I can't tell you how many vaccines. I've traveled the world, so I had every vaccine I could think of that they'd be willing to jab into me, stuck into me. So I'm not an anti-vaxxer saying that all vaccines are deadly. I've been injected with a shit ton. So that is another tool of rhetoric that people will use. If you are against this specific vaccine, therefore you're against all vaccines. So if I make something and I call it a vaccine and you don't want to inject it, you're an anti-vaxxer. If I brand some toxic substance, a vaccine, and you're not willing to get it, inject it, then you're an anti-vaxxer. See, it's insane, right? So there's not only no nuance, it's an intentional dismissal of nuance. It's a conflation of all vaccines. If you don't want to be injected with say there's a new drug, say there's a new headache drug, and it kills certain people, and you don't want to take that drug, does that mean you're anti-drug? I mean, it's ridiculous, right? So, I mean, there are vaccines that have been tested on schmucks for a decade or so, or more, many decades, and we just keeping track of how many people have died versus how many people haven't, specifically from the vaccine, which is a taboo subject today, which it should not be. It should be absolutely transparent. But we can determine from these ones that have been tested for decades the adverse long-term effects, and then judge if it's a reasonable risk from what it's supposed to be protecting you from versus what it may give you. So even then, with these vaccines that we've had for a long time, there may be blood-brain barrier issues leading to autism and the like, and anybody who totally dismisses that out of hand is evil, right? We should be investigating things. We should be proving things safe, not just asserting things safe. It's like a good metaphor would be amusement rides. People saying, well, amusement rides are safe. Therefore, we don't need to rigorously test them daily or do safety checks because they are safe. Well, this is clearly insane. Amusement rides are safe because we are rigorous, because we test them daily, because there are safety checks in order to prove them safe or to judge them safe enough for the risk. You know, we check for broken cotter pins or dried out bearings or whatever they check for. I don't know. I've never looked into inspected an amusement ride. But the result of amusement rides being safe is not because they are intrinsically safe. It's due to our skepticism about the complex system and our diligence in checking the cotter pins and the greased bearings or whatever. It's the same with transport trucks. Transport trucks on the highways are not safe. Therefore, we rigorously train drivers to perform daily safety checks, and we hire transportation officials to pull over trucks on the side of the highway and inspect them and have scales to make sure these guys aren't, have faulty devices on the trucks, making them safe. It's not because trucks are safe. It's because we know trucks are intrinsically dangerous because they're moving tons and tons of stuff. And all it takes 1 point of failure for something to crack, a cotter pin, or I keep saying cotter pins, whatever. I'm sure there's cotter pins on trucks. You know, a ball joint to fail or something. And you could have a loss of life, a serious injury, right? Because these big trucks weigh a lot. They move and they make a lot of, it's a bull in a china shop. It's very easy for something that massive to cause that much damage. And the same thing goes with vaccines. Vaccines are not intrinsically safe. Therefore, we do rigorous, not just vaccines, but vaccines and drugs, any kind of chemicals that we're giving to people as treatments for something. They are not intrinsically safe. Therefore, we do rigorous tests. You think of going back to Ronald Reagan's era. People, big pharma did not want to make vaccines, or at least they cried about it, to Reagan's administration because they were intrinsically dangerous. And they didn't want the liability of people suing them for killing a loved one or injuring somebody. So Reagan gave them political indemnity, or legal indemnity, not political, but legal indemnity from the people that the vaccines may kill or injure. And they did this not out of malice, but because they thought it was for the greater good. And this is a fact that all journalists who report on vaccines are aware if they are in any way competent. So indemnity, you might ask, what is indemnity? Indemnity is a legal protection against damage, loss, or injury resulting from a specified conduct or certain actions. So Reagan gave pharmaceutical companies protection for making vaccines, not just for making drugs. They're still on the hook if they kill people, if they make dangerous drugs. But if they make a substance and it's labeled a vaccine, they are now given legal protection from people who are killed by said vaccine, right? Just by labeling it. Now, what makes something a vaccine? If I'm a drug maker or pharmaceutical, whatever, and I want to make a new biotechnology, what makes it a vaccine versus not a vaccine, right? Well, the definitions of vaccine have been malleable over the past few years for some mysterious reason. It used to be protection against something, right? It used to block you or prevent you from getting a disease, which is not. They've changed the definition to help prevent. So now they're adding weasel words. Anyways, so the production and distribution of something labeled a vaccine is what the pharma have been given protection for. So simply labeling something as a vaccine is now perhaps a legal loophole. Some nefarious cabal could use to introduce a new biotechnology and experiment on the people of the planet with. Because it's a vaccine, because it is a vaccine, it has legal indemnity. Not because vaccines are intrinsically safe, but because vaccines are so dangerous that even with our rigorous diligence of trials and decades of testing, they still require legal indemnity for big pharma to make them. This is how dangerous vaccines intrinsically are. Introducing, we have Bill Gates, right, telling the world that vaccines are safe. And then he brings up new vaccines, like new TB vaccines and AIDS vaccines, which apparently Fauci had his dirty little rat hands involved in. I don't know if he created AIDS or if he just worked on it. I have no idea. But it is definitely sketchy when you see pictures and videos from the 1980s with people holding up signs saying Fauci lied, people died. He was involved in the AIDS pandemic to some level. Well, I don't know if it's a pandemic. I guess it's a pandemic. But anyways, I'm sliding sideways here. So we got Bill Gates talking about polio vaccines and measles vaccines and implying that their safety somehow carries over to COVID vaccines or any new tuberculosis vaccines or any new AIDS vaccines that they happen to create and simply label as a vaccine, which, of course, logically, scientifically does not make them safe. Simply labeling something a vaccine does not mean it is safe. So therefore, saying vaccines are safe, therefore, this vaccine is safe because it's labeled a vaccine is bullshit. Just like as amusement rides are safe, they are not intrinsically safe. Just as trucks are safe, they are not intrinsically safe. Just as guns are safe, they are not intrinsically safe. So they haven't, vaccines, the safe ones, apparently haven't killed millions of people. Therefore, any new vaccine we make is safe because vaccines are safe. This is the argument, and it's a layer cake of disinformation, right? Conflating the class of vaccines, the concept of a vaccine, and then arguing that any new specific substance, any new iteration of that is automatically safe. It does not, and it does not require a decade of testing to prove it so, because it's a vaccine. We no longer need 10-year trials for vaccines, right? And it's clearly insane. And it's the same as saying all trucks are safe, all amusement rides are safe, all guns are safe. Therefore, we do not need safety checks. When it's clear, safety checks are required, and it's the safety checks that make trucks safe or safer. Just as it's the decade of trials and observing over that time frame what any adverse long-term effects may be is what makes the old vaccine safe. Now, new vaccines may be safe, but we don't know. They need to be proven safe over a period of time. Never mind the trials. We have trials that show the acute injury, vaccine injury that can be caused. And we shouldn't be burying that information. But we know there is intrinsic danger with amusement rides and trucks, and we inspect them. Just as we know there's intrinsic danger in vaccines, and that's why we should be testing them. Just like we used to know that there is intrinsic danger in new drugs and vaccines. And that is why we established these incredibly rigorous long-term trials for a decade, 10, 15 years before a new drug is proven relatively safe enough for people to take them. So you think vaccines are so dangerous that we removed legal liability. We gave pharma indemnity from the injured or people that were killed who were vaccinated by their goop. This is the reality that's going on in our world. This does not mean that we should abandon vaccines, but we should absolutely test them for the minimum of a decade or more for adverse long-term effects before we so recklessly give them to the world. Never mind forcing them onto the world, right? So you think what happened here is the FDA and Pfizer, was absolutely the FDA, argued in court to have the short-term 1-month trial of the new COVID shot. They only did it for a month. They didn't do it for 120 months or 200 months. They did it, which is we should be doing. They did it for 1 month. And they tried to hide that data for 75 years in court. The FDA fought in court to have that data hidden from the public. That's the opposite of transparency. What logical argument could they have to hide that data for 75 years? Right. Everybody who took it will be dead by then. Well, everybody who took it's probably going to be dead way before 75 years. They probably just could have said 15 years. Right. But the ones who are alive that didn't take it are going to remember. Right. So maybe they're hoping society will be over in 75 years. I don't know why they picked 75 years. But what's worse about this, the layer cake to this, is that they actually baited and switched the drug they tested from the one that they actually produced and gave to the public. They baited and switched. So the one they started giving to the public wasn't the same one that they tested in those pathetic 1-month trial. It's so what's the point of even hiding the information when they're giving people a different drug? So the crap they were pumping into people was not even the same as the stuff they tested in that 1-month trial. Add to that they removed the production standards of the slop, so we don't even know how accurate they were in the recipe of the slop that they were making in these different batches. This is just a layer cake of reckless, batshit craziness. Needless to say, the conflation of the apparent relative safety of our old vaccines, the polio vaccines, the measles, mumps, rubella, does not logically or even magically carry over to the slop that they call COVID vaccines simply because they are labeled a vaccine. Yet, we continue to hear vaccines are safe, therefore, get your COVID vaccine. That is a false logic. And the people saying that are purveyors of disinformation because they surely know better. If a meathead like me knows better, how are these experts not knowing better? They do know better. They're liars. They are intentional. Lying is intentional deceit, right? So the concept of vaccines is just not safe. When they say vaccines are safe, they aren't safe. Even if you think of the measles, mumps, rubella, and all these other vaccines that have been proven relatively safe, there's still risk. But the concept of vaccines is so dangerous that we had to give pharmaceutical companies legal protection against people suing them from vaccine injury in order for them to produce the stuff. So the idea that vaccines are safe is a total falsity. It is total disinformation. Some vaccines can be proven over time to be relatively safe enough to give to people, right? But until that point. And so the concept of vaccines is not safe. And the unsafety, that unsafety, is that even a word, is specifically why we are diligent with our inspections and handling of them, just like trucks and amusement rides and firearms. They are intrinsically not safe, and therefore we have to prove them safe when we handle them, when we work with them, when we use them. So Vaccines were never safe, but with proper diligent testing over years, we can claim relatively how safe that specific vaccine is. Only for however long it was tested when it comes to the adverse long-term effects. There was also the acute injuries of immediate adverse effects of a jab, which is another issue altogether, but none of the safety data and risks should be hidden from the public when it comes to the acute injuries from new vaccines. But the establishment does not give a shit about informed consent, and they argue for the sheep to just trust the experts. Don't do your own research. Literally, they say this. You are unqualified to understand. You are too incapable. They have no idea what your background is, but they just know you're incapable to understand, right? So this is an argument to the meatheads out there, right? They're trying to scare people. Trust us, right? Science is about transparency and proving your hypothesis as either being true or proving that it is false. And it's that transparency that is being hidden right now by saying trust the experts. These are ideas that were used back in the dark ages of the rise of dogmatic religions. A lot of power-hungry scum back then and today, they still exist. These power-hungry psychopaths. They're desperately and violently trying to push the freedoms and rights of the masses off the table, using every means at their disposal, and tools of manipulative rhetoric are at the center of their campaign. Yet that the masses no longer trusts the ruling elite is the major focus of this year's World Economic Forum 2024 meeting in Davos. If they are a benign organization, what do they care if we even trust them?